Rev up your engine! Today, in large part due to the flooding we had in Houston this week, I'm going to talk about flooded cars. Now, of course, the first thing I'm going to say about flooded cars is try not to get your car flooded in the first place. Modern cars are pretty close to the ground. They don't have that much clearance. You never want to drive in water that's more than, say, halfway up your tire at max. Water, although it is somewhat compressible, it's not much. You get air and gas sprayed into your engine to run the engine. They can compress a whole bunch. But water, only a tiny bit, then it stays solid. So what happens is, while the pistons are going up, if there's water sucked in there, it's got nowhere to go. So it's still spinning the engine. The crankshaft will hold on to the piston rod. Rod will bend. The energy's got to go somewhere. And the weakest thing is the piston rod. The head and the block are pretty strong, but the piston rod is the thinnest part. So as it's being pushed, it'll just bend. And once it's bent, goodbye engine. That's called hydrolocking. And the air intakes on modern cars are pretty low, more efficient for better gas mileage. But here's the air filter, but the air is sucked down way under here. So you're driving water and it sucks that water into the engine. Realize that even if you're only halfway up the tire there, people drive by with a truck, waves come up, the waves get high, the waves get sucked into your engine. Goodbye engine. So park on high ground if there's a storm coming. A big parking ramp up in the air. Drive up, park it there. Go have a drink, eat something in a restaurant. Don't think, oh, I gotta make it through and I'm gonna ford through the water. Because you'll end up like people on I-45 here in Houston. They drove, and then when they got to the underpass, the water was coming up, so they stopped. Well, guess what? There's hundreds or thousands of cars behind them. They're stuck. They're sitting in their car. There's the water. The water keeps rising, rising. Eventually it covers their cars and all the cars behind them. You don't want to get stuck in a situation like that in the first place. But if you do, here's some tips. If you've driven through water, or say your car was parked and you think it might have gone in water, the first thing you want to do is take off the air filter cover. Check the air filter. Check the filter. See if it's dry like this one or soaking wet. If it's soaking wet, water got in there. Don't even try to start the car. Either tow it to a mechanic or take out the spark plugs. You pull them all out of their holes, so then there's no pressure to be built up when you crank the engine. So now if there's any water, the engine will just suck it in and spit it out the spark plug tube holes, and you put the spark plugs in after the water's gone. Well, plenty of water came out. And also, check your engine oil. If you see that it's milky or it's way over full, that means water got in the engine and it floats, the oil floats on top of the water, you'll see the oil level is too high. You don't want to start a car, because if that water gets in the engine and starts being pumped through, it can ruin stuff. But if it just got in and you haven't started it, you can drain it all out before it does any damage. And if you do have an automatic transmission like this Matrix, where you can actually check the fluid, check the transmission fluid too, because water destroys automatic transmissions. You do not want water in automatic transmission. And if some got in and it wasn't run, you drain it, it's fine. But once you start it and it pumps that water mix of water and transmission fluid, it gets in a transmission and ruins things really fast. Now, if you've got a nice car, it's best to have full coverage, because insurance companies, if your car's in a flood and the water gets up to the dash, they're going to total that car and you'll get your money out of it. But any modern car, once it gets that kind of water in it, if you don't have insurance, playing with the devil trying to get that thing running. Because all the electronics in them, if they aren't ruined now, they can be soon, or even in a year or two, completely ruined. There's an example of one of my customers. He had a Volkswagen. Gee, I can't stand him anyways, but he tows it over here and it's not running. So I start checking things. It had all kinds of problems. And I'm working on it. He comes by in a couple hours. I'm swearing at the thing. He says, "What you swearing about?" I said, "Your stupid car. I fixed one thing and then another thing is still wrong. It's driving me nuts." So what does he say to me? He says, "Oh, Scotty, didn't I tell you? A year and a half ago, I had it parked on the street and water came in through the windows on the side. That's how deep it got." And I said, "Why didn't you tell me this in the first place? I would have told you to junk the car then, because It took a year and a half, but then all the electronics started to fry. Corrosion got on them. Once corrosion starts here, it just keeps going and going and going. Now, it took a year and a half, but it was towed to the junkyard after that. You're not looking at a long-term car if the water gets up to the dash. That's why they total them with insurance companies. Say it isn't your car that's flooded out, but you're looking at buying a used car, and you're worried that it might have been flooded in the past. Here's how you can check a bunch of stuff. First, just go in the car. And if it smells like mold, bacteria, just walk. Just leave. Don't buy it. And if it doesn't smell, look under the dash. Should be reasonably clean under there and not covered with rust. If all these nuts and bolts are rusted under there, hey, water got in at some period of time. Then turn the key on. Make sure that the check engine light comes on like this. With the key on and the car not running, that light should be on. If the car gets flooded out, a trick of a lot of mechanics is they'll take the dash out, dry it with a hairdryer. If the check engine light stays on, if it's got a bulb, they'll take the bulb out, or they'll short it out with 120 volts. Since it's a 12-volt bulb, it'll pop. Or if it's LED, they'll get an ice pick and they'll snap the LED so that light doesn't come on. If the light doesn't come on when you turn it on, there's really suspicious stuff. Then you don't buy the car. Of course, you wouldn't hook up a scan tool anyways or have a mechanic do it to check it out. But you turn it on, that light doesn't come on, just walk away. Don't even think about buying it. There's too many possibilities that it was in a flood and has serious electrical problems. And of course, there's the old check the trunk for water. Lift up all the crap that's in here. In this case, we gotta unlock it first. Look inside. Now this one is nice and dark and clear, and we'll look even further. We'll look inside here. Take all the stuff out of the way. See if there's any water or rust stuck anywhere. And then lift up the carpets. Look under them inside. See if there's mold. See if you smell anything. And here's a really good trick. To make it comfortable, there's jute under here. You can feel it. It's just like the underlayment your carpet in your house. If you push or pull it up and you don't even see any jute, it's all gone, then don't buy the car. Because when cars get flooded out, they're going to stink. You got to pull all the seats out, take all the rugs, which are usually rug assemblies, out, and then the jute that's under it is polluted with the dirty water. You take that and you throw it away. Now, you're supposed to buy new jute and put it all back together when it's cleaned and dried. But many guys are lazy. So when they put it back together, they don't put the jute in. Now, so it won't be as cushy when you step on it. That's no big deal in itself. But if there's nothing there, it was built with it there. The only reason someone would take all that stuff out was because it flooded out and got ruined. And if they didn't put it back in, don't buy it. Odds are that car's been flooded. And be very leery when you're buying a used car from somebody you don't know. There's lots of disreputable people. I know a guy years ago, he went from Texas to Jersey. Bought a bunch of Hurricane Sandy cars, cheap. Brought them to Houston. He had his son put them up on the lift. They were draining the transmissions and engines. I watched the water come out. They had 5 or 6 dash units on their workbench. He was drying them with a hair dryer. And I even said, you know what the liabilities are for you selling a flooded car like somebody? If the airbag doesn't work and they get killed, you're going to be responsible. Hey, and the son just responded to me, none of it's in our name. We sell them through third parties. Make sure that the person who's selling you the car is the one who's got the name on the title. Because if it's a third-party seller, a lot of those are flooded or wrecked cars. I had one customer, he called me up. He was going to buy a used Mercedes, and he was meeting the guy in a Sears parking lot. And I said to him, are you serious that you're going to give $15,000 cash to some clown in a Sears parking lot? And then he said, yeah, Scotty, what was I thinking? Sometimes people don't think. You gotta think when you're buying a used car. So now you know a little bit about flooded cars, how to avoid it in the first place, and how to definitely avoid buying a used flooded car. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.